So I want to say thank you again, Warren Smith, for giving me some of your time. We're in part 2, and I want you to continue talking about the classes that you took earlier in your life that really got you to think about music in more of an analytical way. And you had mentioned that you were with a music teacher that taught you how to analyze music,
yes.
And I want you to expound a little bit on that.
Okay, Oliver S. Coleman is his name. And, you know, a lot of people don't learn how to read the, well, 16th note is the usual tiny measurement that you use. And so if you have one beat of music, which is a quarter note, there are 4 repetitions within that one beat. So you have to say 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2, or you say 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and. So we use that to separate the 16th notes.
Right.
And then it's very seldom that you will find 30-second notes, but when they are, they're usually like embellishments.
Right.
On the beat, you know, so of da da da, you know, things like
right.
that. So this is the way you notate them, but they have like a dot behind the note, which gives the note an extra added half of a beat.
Right.
You know, and so that kind of distorts things. Now, you get to see all these things written down in print, and what you get to do is when they have what they call syncopations, which are notes that don't fall on the one, or you know, you have 1 en and this 1 en,
exactly,
know, or 3 en, you know. So these offbeat things are the things that give the music its character.
Right.
But what holds the music steady is the overall beat. But we learn how to separate those 4 divisions of each note. You know, and now when I got into more classical music and other kinds of, in fact, when they started contemporary composers, I'm talking about people in the 1940s and 50s.
Right.
Because now it's all over the place.
Exactly.
But they would start doing things where you had to analyze what we call the offbeats that aren't on the emphasized 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
You know, 1 en, you know, and you get so that you memorize the way these things feel. And when you encounter them visually, you already know what it's going to sound like before you play it.
Right.
And you learn to, just like you read a book, if you're reading a book personally, you would find that your eyes would be way ahead of what your mouth was saying of the words. You understand? You say,
yes.
Today was Tuesday. Now you see the whole sentence, and while you're articulating that, you're thinking about the next sentence.
Right.
But we learn how to separate those 4 divisions of each note, you know. And now when I got into more classical music and other kinds of, in fact, when they started contemporary composers, I'm talking about people in the 1940s and 50s.
Right.
Because now it's all over the place.
Exactly.
But they would start doing things where you had to analyze what we call the offbeats that aren't on the emphasized 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
You know, 1 en, you know, and you get so that you memorize the way these things feel, and when you encounter them visually, you already know what it's going to sound like before you play.
Right.
And you learn to, just like you read a book, if you're reading a book personally, you would find that your eyes would be way ahead of what your mouth was saying of the words. You understand? You say,
yes.
Today was Tuesday. Now you see the whole sentence, and while you're articulating that, you're thinking about the next sentence.
Right.
So
right.
when you learn to read music, you might be playing one measure of music which might have 16, 17, or 18, or any kind of notes in it, and then the next measure would have a different combination. But while you're playing this one, you're looking at that one and analyzing what it's going to be. You see, and the teacher taught me to analyze music like that when I was like 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to high school, I was able to start playing the timpani and the bass drum and messing around with the xylophone and stuff like that. And when I went to college, I was able to major in those percussion instruments.
Now, when you talk about how the measures of the music and the way you were able to analyze those different structures, I have, as a practical matter, how did musicians like Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, and Mary Lou Williams, how did they disrupt that structure that you learned early on?
They didn't disrupt it. They extended it.
Yeah.
You know, so they gave us more options. You see, Charlie Parker, Mary Lou Williams. Who's the other one you mentioned?
Mary Lou Williams and Thelonious Monk.
Yeah, and Thelonious. Well, they all had the same knowledge, but what they did was incorporate their own stylistic influences in it.
Right.
So, if you hear Charlie Parker play something on the saxophone, there are two things that distinguish. Because the saxophone has a human sound that is different from each individual that plays it. You know, your mouth is a different size, the strength of your jaw or your concept of how you want it to sound is so individual that we could hear a saxophone player and say, oh, that's Coleman Hawkins. Oh, that's Lester Young.
Right.
Oh, that's Ben Webster. You know, but, you know, simply by being familiar with their own stylistic approach to it and the sound that it produces.
Yeah.
And so each of us strives to develop our own style.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and the greatest compliment you could get is somebody walking by and say, oh, that sounds like Warren Smith to me.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
or you know, just like we would recognize any of those people that I mentioned.
Exactly. So what made a musician and a pianist like Thelonious Monk so special?
Monk had a different kind of rhythmic concept and a harmonic concept. For instance, music has the typical major scale has 8 tones: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You know, and Monk would take the dominant tone, which is the first and the last notes. You know, say C, D, F, G, B, C, and he'd take the C and use that as the bass tone, but then he'd play a chord that was a half a step higher, which gave it a more, how should I say it, it gave it a twist that was noticeable. Because, you know, everybody is used to like Beethoven, da 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 da, da 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 da, you know, 1, 4, 1, 4, you know, 1,
like an
4.
embellishment.
Yeah, yeah, but these habits were so ingrained that people that were distinctive were ones that changed them and brought their own stylistic period to it, you know. So some of, in Monk's case, it was rhythmical because he would do such strange things. He'd end a piece instead of on downbeat, he'd end it on the one and, you know, and it would kind of give you a suspension that you didn't anticipate, but you would remember it. And the next time you heard it, oh, that's Monk.
Exactly.
And, you know, each individual had their own particular characteristics that identified them.
And speaking of musical characteristics, I want you to speak a little bit about a musician that you knew very, very well. And that was the great Brooklyn-bred drummer, Max Roach.
Man, Max Roach, I was aware of him from being a kid because we had all the Charlie Parker records. Max Roach was on them. Now, they would come through Chicago, and when I got old enough to get into the after hours to the jazz clubs, because I always looked too young to get in. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story about that. When I was 21, I was looking like I was 14.
Yeah.
So all the other guys would have little mustaches and stuff. They'd put me at the first of the line, see. And immediately the guy would see me and he'd say, "You're too young to go in here." And then I'd fill out my ID card. Oh, okay, well, come on in. And they'd assume that everybody else. So they'd let us all in, you know. But I forgot what the point was.
Max Roach.
Oh. So what happened was we were sitting in a club one day listening to Max Roach and Clifford Brown.
Wow.
And I had a friend, his friend's name was Raleigh Floyd. He was one of my track running friends. We
Yeah.
were all athletes at that time running, track and cross country. So he leans over to me and he says, man, Max is playing so loud. I can't hardly hear what the piano player's doing. Now, Clifford Brown was sitting just a little bit farther away from me than you are, and you read the guy's lips when he said this. And so he turns around and walks back to Max to say something. And I said, oh shit, we're going to get thrown out of here. And he did it so quiet. He went back and said something in Max's ear, and Max softened down. And I said, that's a hell of a, and it impressed me so much that he had that kind of flexibility.
Yeah.
In addition to being,
and he didn't take it personal.
No. So what happened was, eventually I moved to New York, and of course I got to meet him, and I was, so I had inherited a rehearsal studio, rehearsal space down on 21st Street in Manhattan. And I had set a timpani and a drum set in there, and we had a piano. And I think we had a bass amplifier, so a lot of musicians began to use that space as a rehearsal spot. And Max came up, and he started rehearsing like once a week. I think on like Thursday afternoons. So every Thursday afternoon, a bunch of us would be there just watching and listening to that. And he knew I was a percussionist, and he saw the timpani and stuff there. And all
right.
That. So one day he said, you know what? He said, our percussion ensembles were thoroughly, the music for them was thoroughly composed, just like all other classical music.
Yes, very structured.
Yeah. So he decided that he would like to have a percussion ensemble that was playing African American classical music. And there were a bunch of us there that were very interested in Joe Chambers, Freddie Waits, Omar Clay, myself, Max. And I'm trying to think who was. Then we hired Ray Mantia because we needed somebody who played African drums.
Right.
When we wanted to go into that kind of mode. And we started rehearsing every Thursday with this group of 6 people. Every Thursday afternoon we get together at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and rehearse about 7. Then people have to go to gigs or whatever and go home.
Right.
And I was teaching at a school called Delphi University.
Right.
So I had a chance to do a concert. I said, okay. I brought this group. This was our first performance. Our first public performance. And we came in there. I've still got pictures of it, And the 6 of us played, and it went over pretty big. So we decided, at that point, Max started reaching out, and he scheduled us a tour. We went to New York. We played about maybe 10 concerts, at several different places in Europe. Brought us all back, made some money. But then we started doing some recordings. And the group became established as a jazz ensemble.
Now, when you first started recording M Boom, was it the original 6 members?
Yes.
Yeah.
Those original members. And I'm trying to think a couple of people got lost in the way, a couple of people died and whatnot. But those who are still alive, we still get together as we.
Yeah.
In fact, that thing we did
in Washington, D.C.
And we've had to recruit other people, some of whom came in as some of our students and just hung around and learned all the music.
Well, Bobby Sanabria played with the ensemble that came together at the Kennedy Center. And I should mention the sold out Kennedy Center. It was a very successful event there, and as I say, that was the last time we got a chance to hear Ray Mantia.
Right. But what happened was we didn't have any music. We were just experimenting.
Yeah.
And then each of the individuals decided to write down a specific piece of music, and it formed such a wide envelope of possibilities that we realized we had something that we could take out on tour.
Right.
And we started performing, and then we did a couple of recordings. So, you know, of course, Max was the one who could put this together because he was the one who had enough prestige to present a new idea to the public and you know,
Right.
and get us listened to.
Exactly.
So that was what put us on.
So where did your career as an educator begin?
When I moved to New York, I came to New York to go to graduate school, Manhattan School of Music,
Yeah.
a master's degree. And a friend of mine had this rehearsal space down on 21st Street, so he gave it to me. And I think when I first went in there, we were paying like, I was paying like $25 a month, you know, something like that, for some ridiculous price for about 5 years. And finally it got to the point where the landlord just gave up on the properties and stopped collecting the rent.
Yeah.
But the place was there, you know, and when that building got torn down, we found another place somewhere. And now I have a place over in the Bronx.
Yeah.
which
Now, how
still
long
serves
have you
that.
had the place in the Bronx?
Yeah.
A long
that was,
time?
maybe 2.5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
A friend of mine, Russell Goins, is an investor. In fact, he was the first black investor in Wall Street.
Uh-huh.
You know, and he's somebody that I've known for over 50 years. He knew about this place, and he knew me well enough over that period of time. He said, you could use a space like this. So they gave me 2 rooms to put all this percussion stuff in. People have been giving me, like, I've got 9 kettle drums.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, sitting around in 2 different rooms and outside in the hallway. But every time you do a concert or something, you don't have to use stuff.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
So, but we were just able to use all that stuff, and with the attention that we were getting from Max's prestige, Boom Boom, it just self-perpetuated itself with students coming in to study with various ones of us.
Yeah.
Different rehearsal groups and things like that. So it's lasted all these, you know.
Yeah. So now you started teaching here in New York City.
Yeah.
Now, tell me a little bit about that experience.
Well, okay, that was very interesting because I came in to the junior high school system.
Yeah,
right?
in the New York City public
New York
school
City
system.
Board of Education.
Yeah.
And I was teaching junior high schools. And the high schools, I knew the superintendent of junior high school music was one of my classmates from Manhattan. His name was John Motley. And he and I had the same interest, which was educating black students and getting them into some of the opportunities that were available
Right.
to white professionals. So I came in and started teaching this junior high school class. Well, they've got us singing, "Oh, I hear those gentle voices calling old black." So I said, no, that's not going to work for these, you know. So I went home and started learning some rock and roll chords. And they had this, what they called instrumental music class. You know, all these kids from junior high school come and sit down. Now, naturally, they're not going to sing old like that. So, you know, I mean, and people were having trouble keeping this class orderly. So one day I went home and I learned boom, 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 shink, boom, 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 shink, boom, 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 boom. You know, I had the whole bass line.
Right, the drifters.
So these kids, man, they were like running across the tops of the chairs and going all over the place and just being unruly. So I came in and I sat down and said, boom, 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 shink, boom. It got quiet.
Yeah.
And when it was time to come in, the whole audience, boom, boom, boom.
That's right.
Man, the assistant principal, the principal, everybody came in. What's he doing in there with those kids? But all I did was reach out to our culture, I should say.
That's right. That's
know?
right. That's
and
right.
this was one of the few times when we were beginning to teach African American culture to African American students.
Right, right.
You know, I mean, nobody was doing that, but then a few people like me started getting into these junior high schools and getting the students stuff that they were interested in.
Right. And
Well,
meeting them where they are.
Yeah, exactly. And all of a sudden, the whole sculpture changed.
Wow.
You know, then the next thing you know, it got to the high school.
Yeah.
And then when I got to college, then I was able to, I was working with a gentleman named Ken McIntyre.
Now tell me what school this was.
Actually, I was teaching at Adelphi University for a couple of years.
Gotcha.
And I was teaching a music appreciation course.
Right.
So what I did was, I said, okay, I'm going to teach these guys 3 different saxophone players. So I brought in records of John Coltrane and Coleman Hawkins and some third person.
Yeah.
And taught these students the difference between their styles so that I could put on a record and I couldn't tell them what it was. And they'd tell me, oh, that's Coltrane. Oh, that's, Ben Webster. Oh, that's,
Right.
And then the next semester I'd do it with piano players.
Yeah.
And then I'd do it with some other instrument. But it gradually grew into a whole where we had to sit down and construct what did you call it, a curriculum.
Right.
Of black music,
Right. But before you get into the curriculum, I really want to touch base on that. But I want to end part 2 and go to part 3. And I want to say, Warren Smith, it's such a pleasure hearing the stories. You tell some great stories. But I want to thank you very much for your time. If you give me a little more of your time, we'll go to part 3 and we'll finish up.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.